Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava again. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. As time goes by, it is becoming more and more difficult to envisage any kind of a revival of Jet Airways, which at one point of time was India's largest airline. But as time goes by, and more agencies have started looking into the transactions, books of accounts, and records of Jet Airways, it turns out that things were not good at all. There has been a murky state of affairs, and as these agencies look into it, all those transactions which have violated law, which have siphoned away money, they are now starting to surface. It all started with State Bank of India ordering a forensic audit in the books of accounts of Jet Airways for the period 2014 to 2018 in order to see whether any kind of a restructuring was permissible and whether it was viable. It appointed an account firm called EY to conduct a forensic audit, and the findings were very incriminating, even though SBI kept those findings to itself and did not really share them. Those findings showed that there has been siphoning of money on a large scale from Jet Airways to a related party owned by the Goyals, the promoters of Jet Airways, and money was being siphoned off in a good way. In the meanwhile, the Enforcement Directorate also opened up investigation against Jet Airways on charges of money laundering related to its deal of selling jet privilege. These charges started snowballing. More and more agencies came into picture. The ROC investigated and came out with a damaging report on the 8th of May. The SFIO has already begun investigations into these very charges of siphoning of funds, corporate mismanagement, laundering of money, fudging of accounts, manipulation of its results, etc. And each investigation seems to be confirming each other's incriminating findings. It was because of this that Mr. Naresh Goyal and his wife were not allowed to leave India, and in a very dramatic fashion, when their plane had already started taxiing to take off, the plane was called back and they were deplaned. The Ministry of Home Affairs is said to have informed the immigration authorities not to let them leave India. The charges certainly seem to be of a serious and incriminating nature. While this is the present state of affairs of Jet Airways and we are not surprised about it, the bankers seem to be working towards somehow reviving the operations by getting in an investor, by getting in a buyer for the airline. It was in February 2019 that State Bank of India very confidently said that they would get a buyer for the airline by May 2019, and that by middle of June 2019, the airline would be under a new management. It was in February, you will recall, that the bankers became the majority shareholder of Jet Airways and they now own almost 51% of the airline's shareholding. But that was a tall estimate. Why would any investor want to come on board for an airline which has not only got so many legacy issues of having manipulated the books of accounts, etc., but which also sits on huge debt? Employees Union of Jet Airways estimates the present debt to be in the range of $3 billion, almost 21,000 crores, which includes 9 to 10,000 crores owed to banks, lot of money owed to vendors, employee dues to other suppliers, and of course, lessors of the planes. Why would somebody want to really pump in that kind of money to revive the airline, much as it may be claimed that it had a market share? That market share is also depleted. And not unsurprisingly, the bankers did not get any prospective buyer for Jet Airways. In the inception, banks said that they are only calling for bids by invitation, but when no bid really materialized, unsolicited bids also started coming in, often from very dubious and questionable parties, which were wholly unviable, and they made no headway. It was at the insistence of banks that finally Etihad made a non-binding conditional offer for takeover of Jet Airways, and that too was a non-starter. Etihad demanded that about 90% of the bank loans be written off and that the banks must rope in a majority investor because Jet Airways was not willing to move out from its position of being a minority investor of Jet Airways. Etihad thus gave an offer which was not viable, and the bankers were back to square one. At the moment, it is said that the bankers are in touch with the Hinduja Group, and the Hinduja Group, Etihad and SBI are said to be in talks, seeing how to take over the airline. But even these Etihad as well as Hinduja together have come up with conditions which again are not viable. They don't make the entire exercise to be even fruitful. The Hindujas too have demanded, it is said, that at least 75% of the bank loans must be written off. And both Etihad and Hinduja say that they are not willing to be the majority shareholder, but they want significant management control of the airline in case the Hindujas pump in money to be a minority shareholder. That's the most undoable thing in corporate world. How can a minority shareholder be given significant management control and a significant representation of the board? And in that case, what would the majority owner do whenever and if at all it comes on board? So the entire exercise to take over Jet Airways even by the Hindujas is a non-starter. And we wonder, how would the banks be able to write off 90% of the bank loans in such a situation where quickly a comparison will come? Why was Kingfisher not given those privileges which Jet would be given if at all its loans are written off? As time passes by, the entire exercise, the entire effort to revive Jet Airways is becoming more and more dismal. The chances are very poor that the airline will actually get revived. At the moment, it is estimated that a minimum 5,600 crores is needed in order to start the operations of Jet Airways, which today, as we have often said, has got no planes, no pilots, no staff, and no market share. It's a closed airline today. And moreover, over the last few weeks, Jet's landing routes, which are supposed to be very, very valuable for an airline, and Jet's flying routes, they have already been allotted, most of them, to other airlines. What is the value really left in Jet Airways that even a Hinduja would want to take it over? And now it's very clear it would come with a lot of legacy issues related to corporate mismanagement, siphoning of funds, money laundering, and various such criminal and law illegal activities having taken place. The situation for the bankers is dismal. At one point of time, bankers used to say that even if Jet Airways is closed down, they would be able to recover about 4,600 crores of their funds against the planes that Jet Airways own, the few planes that it does, against which also there are debts payable. But now, the estimate is that if Jet Airways is not revived, the bankers are very uncertain, if at all, what would they be able to recover. The biggest losers in this exercise is not just the bankers and not just the employees of Jet Airways, those 22,000 employees who lost their jobs, but it is also the Indian system. How was such an airline allowed to continue its operations for 27 years when it is clear that for all these years, all that Mr. Naresh Goyal was doing was gaming the system and somehow ensuring that the airline is afloat. And while he was doing that, he was certainly lining his pockets and becoming the billionaire that he's supposed to be. Jet Airways is yet another story of a bankrupt company with a billionaire promoter. I'm sure the law will catch on, and I'm sure down the line, all the reports which indicate incriminating transactions at Jet Airways are going to see him being punished by law, which is very necessary. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.